It's the Beaver Banter podcast. My name is CJ Baumgartner, my co-host Ian Rivers, and we're breaking down all that's going on through Bemidji State Athletics. And Ian, another great weekend to be a Beaver. We wrapping up some winter sports, also previewing on some spring sports that are just beginning. So where do you want to start this one, Ian?
I think we just start with kind of how those spring sports have started off. Not a whole lot to report on yet, but I know the softball team was in action again. They've now totaled 8 games on the season. They had bubble invite number 2, which I believe was in Minot, North Dakota, and they ended up splitting on the weekend 2-2. So a little bit of an improvement over the first weekend. That brings them up to 3-5. The first game was at Minot State, the host of the invite. That was a 5-6 loss in 8 innings, and then an 8-2 victory over Providence from Montana, an 8-0 victory over Carroll College, and then a 1-4 loss over Montana State Billings. So they had a pretty decent weekend, 2-2. I guess you never really know. At least I don't. I know that you're kind of more into the baseball scene, and I know this isn't baseball, but I never know how much to take from like preseason invitational tournaments or anything like that.
Well, it's always kind of hard because it's like in basketball and all the time where they're getting those games in and you just have no point of reference. So you have no idea. Like in some of the teams they play Montana State Billings. We have no idea if they're any good. We have no idea if they're really bad. And it's just kind of a wash. And by the way, these teams have likely never played each other. So there's a bit of that factor in as well, where there's a lot of familiarity once you get into conference play. So yeah, it's kind of a wash. It's kind of, unless you're really in the know to kind of really tell who's good and who's not, it's kind of just a wash. And like you said, right now 2-2 in the last week. Their record right now is 3-5 on the season. And now they go down to Florida for the next handful of games. They're going to be down on March 5th, down in Clearmont, Florida. They're going to be taking on Clarion. They're going to be taking on Pittsburgh, Johnstown. They're going to be facing California, Pennsylvania. A little confusing. And teams like St. Anselm College, Millersville, Ashland, Kentucky Wesleyan. It's a whole slate of teams down in these tournaments because you're trying to load in as many games as you can while slowly working your way up north. I think Bemidji, I think on their schedule right now, they have their first game of the at the BSU softball field at March 28th to play Crookston in a doubleheader. That one's probably being played at the Chet. I'll be quite honest. But yeah, that's just how their schedule breaks down. I think in these early season games, it's really the one thing that sticks out to me is just where the offense has been at. Now, if you look last week, we talked about some of their games. They won the first game 3-1, but then scored 2 combined runs in their 2 games against Minnesota Duluth and scored 8 against UMaris. And then this week, the offense, a little bit harder to come by in those losses that they had, including a 1-4 loss and then a 5-6 loss, that one going 8 innings. But then in those games against Providence and Carroll College, you saw them get the runs back a little bit more. And I think college softball is just a different animal. It's then baseball in the sense. I mean, the pitchers basically pitch the entire game. The lineups are pretty much set. It's a little bit different of a game. But I think early on for this BSU softball team, I think it's getting on that right track because this is a program that has had some ups and downs and hasn't quite been able to get their foot going forward, get their feet right going forward, I should say, over the last couple seasons, trying to kind of hit a refresh on the program.
Yeah, so a little bit of a break here for softball. I think it's a couple weeks before this Florida tournament or gauntlet, whatever you want to call it. A lot of games coming within like a 5-6 day stretch there in Clermont, Florida. Tennis was also in action over the weekend. They got their second win of the season. They lost the first day in Winona to Winona State, 7-0, and then they did end up taking game 2 on Saturday from the Peacocks from Upper Iowa, 4-3. So they improved their record to 2-6. And I'm not going to lie to you, I don't know a whole lot about tennis. I mean, I know the general rules of it, but I didn't watch any of this to know how to break down, how they played or anything like that. So I'm just going to give them credit where credit's due. Good for them for getting that record up to 2-6, and hopefully they can continue to build on that. They, of course, also have a little bit of a break now, and then they'll play in Rogers, Minnesota against Bethel on March the 4th. So that's that. I know baseball is getting underway this weekend, but I suppose we could touch on that. I don't want to spoil it, but we might have talked about it last week. We will be doing a second show this week. This is more of a, break down spring sports, and then basketball today, hockey Thursday. So I guess without further ado, you want to kind of wrap up women's basketball season, CJ?
Yeah, let's go right into wrapping up women's basketball. No, they got a nice win against St. Cloud State that kind of helped them finish up their season. But in terms of women's basketball, I think pretty disappointing, I think would be the word. Now, the team, you could argue, maybe didn't quite have the talent that they had in previous years, and maybe kind of hitting that refresh, that core that they had with Czar and with Bachman and Yoder when she had some players around her. That core that they had graduated throughout the last couple of years and now is gone. And now they're trying to find that new young core. And it was a bit of a struggle for them trying to get that going and trying to reestablish themselves. They were 8-18 overall on the season, 5-17 in conference play, including a massive losing streak throughout the middle of the, maybe not massive is where I would put it, but a sizable losing streak throughout the year that really just kind of sunk them. Believe it was from November 26th, and then they didn't win a game until basically New Year's Eve. So you went almost the entire month of December without getting a win, and then January wasn't much better. So not trying to dump on them or anything. That's just how the season goes sometimes, and they're trying to reestablish themselves as a program and with this new core. And sometimes that takes a little bit. Sometimes that takes a year or two, especially in Division II women's basketball. You can't just reload necessarily when you get a good core. Sometimes you have to take that step back.
Yeah, I think there was definitely some positives, especially towards the end of the season. Once late January and February kind of hit, we got 3 wins out of the last, I think it's 7 games of the year. So I guess if you're going to look at our overall record and then take that 7-game sample size, that's a pretty good 7-game sample size for this team to build off of for next season. But yeah, they finished, like you said, 8-18 overall, 5-17 in the conference. That is obviously not good enough to make the NSIC basketball tournament, which starting actually tonight. I know that it's been kind of moved up due to the weather that's been hitting a lot of Minnesota.
Some weather? Is that impacting anybody lately?
Yeah. I think it's just getting started too. So 8th place in the NSIC North and a tie for 14th overall in the conference with Winona State and Sioux Falls at 5-17. So there's definitely room to improve, and there's really nowhere to go but up from here. I hope for this team, and I do think we've seen them put it together in the past. We talked about it earlier this season, how before COVID kind of hit, they seemed like they were strutting in the right direction, and that just seemed to kind of put a damper on how things were going. And I do have faith that they can put it together, and at least now that 6 teams make the NSIC tournament, I think that they could be in a position next year where they're trying to claw their way into the tournament.
Yeah, and looking here at some of the post-season stats, now that everything's wrapped up, looking at their scores, they're going to have to figure out who takes that kind of who takes the baton in terms of scoring now that Yoder is believe graduating. So Yoder, if you look at most of their games, she is the leading scorer in over half of them. You have Alyssa Hill, you have Sam Bodeganish, you have Maddie Shires, you have a few different names in there, but the name that pops up consistently is Trinity Yoder in some of the scoring department. So they're going to have to figure that out. She also did a good part in rebounds as well. So figuring out who's going to kind of take that mantle of this was definitely her team this year. And now who takes that as kind of the leader and who goes on from there will be important in terms of trying to figure out this team. But looking overall at their team statistics, they averaged about 59.5 points per game, but defensively giving up about 69 points a game. From the field is really where it got them. They shot 38% from the field. Their opponents shot about 41.5. From 3, they shot 27.5% 38%, and free throws made, 3-pointers rather, made per game was about 5. From the free throw line, we're about 70%. In terms of rebounding, they had about 35 rebounds a game, and their opponents were getting about 39 to 40. Assists per game were about even. Bemidji State getting just a little bit more compared to their opponents this season. Turnovers per game, BSU is averaging 16 per game. Their opponents 14. Steals about the same. Blocks about the same. And that's kind of the breakdown of things. Looking by quarter, the third quarter is probably their best of the season, looking in their amount of points scored. But really, compared to their opponents, they just have gotten outscored every time when you stack it up like that. Looking at their leading scorer, Trinity Yoder was their leading scorer with 413 points on the season. Alyssa Hill had 296. Sam Potogancic had 244. Maddie Shears had 135. Isabel Majeski had 128. And then it kind of dips off a little bit. You have Aaron Burnett, Rachel Coing, some of these names down below 100 points scored on the season. And in 3-point percentage, it was Alyssa Hill leading the way with a 41%. 3-point percentage and rebounding was Potoganic down low, averaging about 6.5 rebounds per game. So a lot of information to throw at you here, Ian, but that's kind of a by the book, tail of the tape, how this season has gone for the Lady Beavers in basketball.
Yeah, the one thing that really stands out to me is the shooting numbers. I mean, I think you said 38% from the field overall. Yeah. That's pretty low. And I know it's going to be different. Obviously, if you're going to take well, in the NBA, teams typically shoot around 50% from the field. And I know that, it's a lot easier for an NBA center to hit a layup from underneath than it is for a lot of these Division II women, because they're probably about a foot taller than most of these posts are. So there's going to be some discrepancy just in the physical stature of those two. So don't compare NBA statistics to Division II college basketball. But still 38% is pretty low, especially like you said, 41% given up on the opposing end. But I think that's kind of what we had talked about almost every time this year that we talked about women's basketball and kind of took a deep dive into stats and exactly what went wrong. It seemed to be poor shooting. Obviously with men's, we talked about winning the rebounding battle, and with women's, it seemed to be poor shooting. I think those are two things that have kind of struck consistently throughout the season with this team, and hopefully they can find a way to bring in some offense next year and really help the scoring out. But I think that they could do it. I think there's not too many. How many seniors does this team have? It didn't seem like it was that old of a team.
Yoder was the main one, and I think maybe there's one other senior on this team. I apologize, I don't have the number off the top of my head for those listening, but yeah, they're a youthful team, and I think we also touched on that throughout the year. Is like that last core, they got a lot of playing time when they were younger, took a lot of lumps, had a lot of losses, but the idea
a lot of growing pain
was that they were going to grow together and kind of figure things out on the fly, and it was better to get them on the court than to not have them on the court. And I think that's kind of what this team had. And back to the shooting percentage, Ian, and I think that just the interesting thing about that is because this is a team, and I believe they've pretty much kept the same philosophy because Coach Chelsea DeVille has been here this whole time since I followed BSU women's basketballs. They're a team that doesn't necessarily like the outside game. They're a team that likes to get it down low into the post and move the offense off of that. They're a team that likes to do it that way traditionally, and that's at least how she has been philosophically. And maybe things have changed a little bit here and there. But when you want to play that style of offense, you're going to need better shooting from the floor, especially if you want to get it down into the post and you want to do some of those other things if you're not quite relying on the 3 ball. And that's not a critique on anybody. That's just saying, if you want to play that style of basketball, that's just something that's going to have to get a little bit better as they try and get better.
Exactly. I think that this team has room to improve, like we talked about all those years ago. The growing pains are going to be right now, but hopefully, even if it's not next year, even if we just see a one win improvement or 2 win improvement on the overall, and 1 win in the conference or something, just at least taking that next step to hopefully getting this program turned in the right direction would be something to look forward to. And I do think that this could be a quick turnaround here for the Lady Beavers.
Exactly. And it all depends on the players you got coming in, and we'll find out more about that and do a little bit more deep diving as the spring goes on and we start to kind of look at what next year's team looks like. But yeah, I mean, Potogancic is there. You got some other young players who are getting their time, and just got to see them take that next step like you're talking about. So Ian, unless there's something else with women's basketball you want to touch on, I think we can move on a little bit. And is there anything else you want to wrap up in this portion of the podcast?
No, I think we got it all covered. Like
One
we said,
last
we're gonna. Yeah, go ahead.
One last thing I want to mention before we kind of wrap things up here. I saw this on Twitter, and maybe we mentioned it on last week's podcast, and maybe we didn't. Was looking at a piece of Beaver related news, and that is that a former Beaver alumni is actually making some waves. So Hannah Czar, who was on this team about 5 or 6 years ago now. I believe she was probably a senior in 2016, so a few years ago now. She graduated from BSU, moved on, got into coaching, and is now an assistant coach for Cleveland State women's basketball, like a pretty prominent assistant coach on that team. So that's pretty cool. Cleveland State, I believe, Division I in women's college ball.
Yeah, they should be a Division I team. So that's good. It's good for her getting her name out there and exposing the brand of BSU. I guess that's a really good thing.
It's the Beaver brand. It's what we try and do here, Ian. Trying to bring that around.
Exactly.
Anything else? Anything else you want to touch on with Bemidji State?
Well, do you want to go over, men's basketball, how their weekend was, and maybe preview this?
Yeah. Let's preview that a little bit. So the men's basketball team, they beat Crookston. They got the win that they needed to get, and then they absolutely. Or St. Cloud State, excuse me. Yeah, St. Cloud. And then they got their lunch handed to them by
Yeah.
UMD. I got there on Sunday morning. Or Sunday afternoon rather. I was having lunch with some family, and they were like, "Did you see the score of that Bemidji State game?" I was like, "No, I didn't catch it. Like I was just really busy Saturday night. I didn't have a chance to get to it." And he showed me the final score, and I was like, "Oh, yikes." I'm not sure what went into that, but yeah, not a great way to end the season against a ranked opponent in UMD, especially considering how well they played against Moorhead. But doesn't matter. New season starts. But yeah, anything you have to say about that weekend, Ian?
Yeah, not really. We kind of already knew where we were standing in the fourth spot in the NSIC North. We were just trying to keep that momentum going, I think, and we did and didn't. We at least got the split. But you would have liked to have been a little bit more competitive against Duluth, but that's just how it goes sometimes. Sometimes you're not going to show up and play your best game. And that, I guess, was apparent against a pretty good Duluth team who's now in the playoffs, and they've already advanced to the next round. Some of these games are getting pushed up to Tuesday because of the inclement weather that's, pushing across the upper Midwest. Minnesota Duluth played Mankato in the first round a couple hours ago, and they ended up beating them 88-68. The other game that's gone finals so far is Minot State taking a 1-point victory in 3 overtimes over SMSU. So Minot State advancing the North so far 2-0 in the NSIC tournament. And the game that's starting actually just about 20 minutes ago should be St. Cloud State and Sioux Falls. That game is in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So, and then the only one that's tomorrow will be the Beavers and Augustana. So, I guess surprise, surprise. Now we haven't touched on that, but that's who the Beavers drew. Augustana, a team that we've beaten this year when we played them earlier. The one game we have played them in was a 4-point victory in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Now the script is flipped and it'll be in Bemidji, and hopefully we can keep that momentum going. They did release the regional rankings for the NCAAs, and the Beavers were not under the consideration listing. So I'm assuming that means that our season is likely over if we were to lose in the NSIC tournament. So, and that's not necessarily surprising. Like I said, I think we would have had to probably beat Duluth to even be close to that category this weekend. Yeah. But it's not surprising. It's kind of where we thought we were the whole season. Was just kind of on the outside looking in, just trying to do the best we can, make the NSIC tournament, and win a couple games here. And I still think that's the goal. I think the minimum should probably be, continue this success and beat Augustana and at least get to the quarterfinals at the Pentagon. That's what I'm looking for. And our quarterfinal matchup would be Wayne State, should we advance. And of course, Thursday we will be either breaking down the end of the season or previewing that matchup against Wayne State. So we'll touch on that more if we get to it. But Augustana, I'm happy with the matchup. It was looking like it was either them or Mankato, and either of those teams we had beaten. And that doesn't mean a ton because it's a different game. It's a different game every day. We lost to St. Cloud the first time we played them, and then we beat them by 18 the second time. So every game is different. It's been over a month since we played Augustana now, so obviously it's never going to be the same script. But I'm thinking it's a good thing for us to go into a game against an opponent that we know we can handle, rather than just going in and say, oh yeah, here, play Northern State, who you haven't beaten this year. And I think that's probably a good thing.
Yeah, it gives them a little bit of momentum here. Gives them a chance to get that playoff started off on the right foot at the BSU gymnasium. And by the way, that's something that we talked about. Get a playoff game, get a chance to get some fans inside the BSU gymnasium and get that place rocking. And it appears that the university is doing everything they can to get people to that game. I believe the first 100 students get in free to the playoff game. Now, I know students get in free to every basketball game, but I don't know if it's because it's playoffs that the NSIC mandates that students have to pay, but BSU, I believe, covering the cost of those first 100 students to come in.
I can't imagine it's super expensive, to be honest with you, but yeah.
No, but you tell a college student free and they're gonna just run in there. They're doing a whiteout as well. They want everyone to wear white for the game, so that's really cool. And I'm curious. I want to watch the live stream of this in certain points in the game to see what that fan experience is like, because I think once you're in the game, I think Bemidji State does a really good job of keeping people entertained and having a bunch of cool promotions and all that throughout the game. But now the team is good enough where people want to come in and they want to watch and they want to get a little crazy, and it's a team in Augustana that has traditionally been good and traditionally had postseason runs. So a chance to kind of show who you are against them will be really important. And by the way, looking at that game against Duluth, here's why they lost. I mean, one big reason why: they had their lowest shooting performance of the season, shooting 30.5% from the field and 13% in the first half. That's not going to do it.
13%. They had 11 points. It was 45-11 at halftime.
So, and there's two ways.
Oh my God.
There's two ways of tracking that. One way is, oh my gosh, like UMD just locked us down defensively. They gave us no good shots. We couldn't do anything. And the second one is, hey man, we couldn't shoot. Like, we were just off for whatever reason. And you hope it's the second one. Time will tell. But yeah, this matchup against Augustana will be interesting. Winning the boards is going to be something that's going to be very, very instrumental for this team. Getting Sutherland and getting Kone going are going to be big in this matchup against Auggie. Having the home court advantage is big. Having Augustana have to drive through all the snow and what will probably be a longer bus ride, if they haven't made that already, from Sioux Falls up to Bemidji. Definitely in the Beavers' favor to not have to travel in this situation, and then getting to play on the home court and getting the BSU gymnasium pack should help. And not only that, not only do they need to win to try and advance and get to the Pentagon, but they do need to win because friend of the podcast, Marcus Asmus, who was a guest the last time they played Augustana, and he shared a little bit about his experience with all that. He and I made a bet. So the winner of this game has to send the loser gear from the other school, and we got to post it on Facebook. So please, BSU. I don't want to be repping any Auggie merch at all. I want to order like a double XL shirt for Marcus so he has to wear that thing. So come on, guys, come on, Beavs. Let's step it up for the Beaver Banter podcast, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the main keys to beating Augustana is, don't want to sound like a beaten on drum here, but winning the rebounding and then just like not having an 11-point half is going to be, a big thing. I'm still looking at these like stats with my jaw just dropped. Like 44% from the free throw line. They shot better from the 3-point arc than they did from the field. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, that's probably a little bit of a combination of Duluth playing really good defense and like just like the shots will not fall. Like they physically will not. And it's just
Hmm.
there are some of those nights that they just don't go in, and you just don't know what it is. It's just the team is just not shooting well. And that can happen. That can happen to anybody at any time. And that's why in a single game format like this, it's so exciting to watch college hoops because, in the NBA, you watch it and yeah, you have an off game and you lose by 30. You come back in 2-3 days and you do it again. You got a couple more tries at it. But everything's at stake here. Now that we're in tournament play. And everything's up for grabs. And I think that they can absolutely beat this Augustana team. They've done it before. It was probably a little bit closer. I'd have to go back and look. Let me pull up the box score. I think Augustana kind of pulled into the game late. I
I
do
think that's
remember
how it went.
tracking
Yeah.
this one. And I was like, okay, we were kind of up by double digits most of the game, I believe. And then it was kind of a late run by Augustana, if I remember anything correctly. That kind of just made it seem a little closer. But again, not that that means anything. We still have to show up and we still have to perform. And like you said, the travel is going to be a big thing, especially in weather like this. Who knows? Maybe Augustana is already in Bemidji. Maybe they've already decided, you know what, let's get out in front of the weather. We're going to be there before anything starts. They won't have to travel through the weather. Well, actually, the game is tomorrow, so that might not actually be like a ridiculous thing to say. They
Right.
may
They
actually
could
be
have
in
totally
Bemidji
came
today.
here. They could have totally got here yesterday or like this morning, like left last night or something along those lines.
Exactly. And so, but still, they're sleeping in hotels. They're not, back in their own houses or dorms or wherever they're staying at, in their comfort of their own abode. They're in Bemidji, and I'm sure there's fans all around the team hotel all night long tonight, even through the storms. That are going to be blasting loud music. It's going to be shades of the Mexican fans when the U.S. goes to play in Stadio Azteca. They're not going to let the buses travel through the streets. It's going to be hell for those Augustana players, I'm sure. That's how
Pack
passionate the Bemidji community is about basketball.
Pack Highway 71. They're not allowed on that thing.
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited. I don't have any plans as of right now, so I'm actually gonna be able to sit down and watch the entirety of this playoff game, from what I expect tomorrow evening. And then of course, if we win, we'll touch on that on Thursday, for the playoffs this weekend. And I'm gonna go ahead and bookmark it. I think that we'll be doing that. We'll be talking about a 32-point victory over Augustana, and how it was never even close.
Ooh, let's go. Ian Collin is shot. Yeah, I think we're talking about the Beavers playing down at the Pentagon this time, about 24 hours or 48 hours or whenever when we decide to record that podcast post game, and we will be ready to preview that matchup against, like you said, Wayne State, and looking at everything there. So I have nothing to add other than roll damn Beavs though.
Yeah, roll damn Beavs.